Hello students, welcome to your social studies class. Students, in today's class, we will be doing history, chapter number 6, new questions and ideas. In this chapter, we will cover 5 topics, which include the story of Buddha, Upanishads, Jainism, the Sangha, and monasteries. So let us proceed with the explanation of the chapter. First, let us get familiar with the story of Buddha. Siddhartha, who was also known as Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, was born 2500 years ago. This was a time of rapid change in the lives of the people. New cities were developing, and the life was changing in the villages as well. So many thinkers were trying to understand these changes in the society. Also, they wanted to find and the true meaning of life. Buddha belonged to a small gun, which was known as the Sakya gun, and he was born into a Kshatriya family. When he was a young man, he left all the comforts of his home in search of knowledge. He wandered for several years, meeting and holding discussions with other thinkers as well. He finally decided to find his own path to realization, and he meditated for days on end under a peepal tree at Bodh Gaya, which is a place in Bihar. Students, at Bodh Gaya, sitting and meditating under the peepal tree, he attained enlightenment. Enlightenment means the great knowledge, knowledge about the true meaning of life. After that, he was known as Buddha. The meaning of the word Buddha is the wise one. He then went to Sarnath, which is a place near Varanasi, where he taught for the first time. He spent rest of his life traveling on foot, going from place to place, teaching people. And finally, he passed away in Kusinagar, which is in Nepal. Buddha taught that this life is full of sufferings and unhappiness. And the reason is of this suffering and unhappiness is the desires which we have and the desires which cannot be fulfilled. Sometimes, even if we get what we want, we are not satisfied and we crave, we want even more and more. Buddha described this thirst as tanha. He taught that this constant craving could be removed by following moderation in everything, which means that if we want everything in moderation, everything in limit, we will not have any suffering or unhappiness. He also taught people to be kind and to respect animals and the lives of others. He believed that the results of our actions, whether good or bad, affect us in this life and the next. The Buddha taught to the people in their language only, which was Prakrit, so that everybody could understand his message. Upanishads. Around the time Buddha was preaching, and perhaps a little earlier, other thinkers were also trying to find out the answers to difficult questions. Some of them wanted to know about the life after death. Others wanted to know why sacrifices should be performed. Many of these thinkers felt that there was something permanent in the universe that would last even after death. They described this as Atma, or the individual soul, and the Brahman, or the universal soul. They believed that ultimately both Atma and Brahman are one. Many of the ideas of Upanishadic thinkers were a part of the later Vedic text as well. Upanishad's word literally means approaching or sitting near, and the text contained conversations between teachers and students, which were ideas presented through simple dialogues. Most of the Upanishadic thinkers were men, especially Brahmins and Rajas. Occasionally, there is a mention of women thinkers as well. One of them is Gargi, who was famous for her learning and also participated in debates in the royal court. Poor people rarely took part in these decisions. But one exception was Satyakama Jabala, who was named after his mother, a slave woman, Jabali. He had a deep desire to learn about reality and accepted as a student by a Brahmin teacher named Gautama and became one of the best known thinkers of his time. Now, after understanding about Buddhism, let us move on and understand about Jainism. One of the most famous thinkers of Jainas was Vardhamana Mahavira, and he spread his message of Jainism around 2500 years ago. He was also born into a Kshatriya family of Licchavis, which was a part of Vaji Sangha. At the age of 30, he left home and went to live in the forest. For 12 years, he had led a hard and a lonely life, and at the end, he attained enlightenment. He taught a simple philosophy or a doctrine that men and women who wished to know the truth must leave their homes. They must follow strictly the rules of ahimsa, which means not hurting or killing living beings. All beings, said Mahavira, long to live. To all things, life is dear. Ordinary people could understand the teachings of Mahavira and his followers because they used the language of the common people, which was Prakrit. There were several forms of Prakrit used in different parts of the country. For example, Prakrit spoken in Magad was known as Magadhi. Followers of Mahavira were known as Jains, and they had to live a very simple life begging for food. They had to absolutely be honest and especially were not asked to steal. Also, they had to observe celibacy, which means brahmacharya. And men had to give up everything, including their clothes. It was very difficult for most men and women to follow these rules. Nevertheless, thousands of people left their homes to learn and teach this new way of life. Many more remained behind and supported those who became monks and nuns by providing them with food, water, and important things such as medicines. Jainism was supported mainly by traders. Farmers who had to kill insects to protect their crops found it difficult to follow the rules of Jainism. Over 100 years, Jainism spread to different parts of North India and to Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. The teachings of Mahavira and his followers were transmitted orally for several centuries. They were written down in the form in which they were presently available at a place called Valabhi in Gujarat about 1500 years ago. Now let us understand what do we mean by Sangha. Students, both Mahavira and Buddha felt that those who wanted to know the true meaning of life had to leave their homes. So they arranged an association for those who left their homes. And this association was called Sangha. The rules made for the Buddhist Sangha were written down in a book, and this book is known as Vinay Pitak. From this, we know that there were separate branches for men and women. All men could join the Sangha, but children had to take permission from their parents, and slaves had to take permission from their masters to join the Sangha. Those who worked for the king had to take permission, and debtors had to take permission from the creditors. Women who wished to join the Sangha had to take permission of their husbands. Men and women who joined the Sangha led simple lives. They meditated for most of the time and went to cities and villages to beg for food during fixed hours only. That is why they were known as bhikkhus. Students, bhikkhus is a Prakrit word for beggars. They taught others and helped one another. Sometimes even quarrels took place among the bhikkhus, but they were peacefully solved within the Sangha. Those who joined the Sangha included the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the merchants, the laborers, barbers, courtesans, and slaves. Many of them wrote down the teachings of Buddha. Some of them also composed beautiful poems describing their lives in the Sangha. Monasteries. To begin with, both Jain and Buddhist monks went from place to place throughout the year to teach people about the true meaning of life. The only time they stayed at one place was during the rainy season, when it was really difficult for them to travel. Then their supporters used to build temporary shelters for them in the gardens, and they also lived in the natural caves in hilly areas. As time went on, many supporters of the monks and nuns and they themselves felt the need for more permanent shelters, and so monasteries were built. These monasteries are known as viharas. The earliest viharas were made up of wood, and then later on, they were started making of brick. Some were even in caves that were dug out in the hills, especially in Western India. Very often, the land on which the viharas was built was donated by a rich merchant or a landowner or a king. The local people came with gifts of food, clothing, medicines for monks and nuns who traveled from one place to another. In return, they taught the people. Over centuries, Buddhism spread to many parts of the subcontinent and beyond. Students, these are two examples of Buddhist monasteries, which were seen as permanent shelters, and they are also called viharas. So that was all about the explanation of the chapter. Let us have a quick look of to the different questions. You all are requested to solve these questions in your book after reading the chapter and listening to the explanation. Thank you.